I know I started to change the voiceover, but currently I don't have the time to revise all the videos and I don't want to make you wait forever. Sorry, it's the old voice again. But this way I can upload the videos faster.
A few days have passed since Komori and Atsumu left for the north. During that time, Atsumu and Komori searched for Yachi's exact location and successfully found it. The whole way up, Atsumu had been silent, still overwhelmed by the fact that Sakusa had kissed him. Since he couldn't quite believe it himself yet, he didn't want to tell Komori about it at first either. So for the ride he stayed in his thoughts and came to Komori with the excuse that he was tired from training and therefore didn't want to talk much. Fortunately, Komori had bought it. It was so weird. Atsumu's heart still raced as he thought of the kiss. How Sakusa pressed his soft lips to his own, how much love and passion was in that kiss. He still trembled as he thought of how Sakusa called him something special, but it was weird. Since then, they've completely avoided each other. Sure, Atsumu was up north and Sakusa spent the last few days on the night shift, which was over by now, since he had to take care of Aiko. But they never once messaged each other or called each other. At that point, Atsumu was just too scared to make the first move. He didn't want to be a burden for Sakusa, he didn't want to be pushy, and most of all he was just afraid what would come back from Sakusa. If he hadn't contacted him yet, then that wasn't a good sign, was it? Atsumu knew that Sakusa was there and he also knew that Sakusa would have just enough time to text him. After all, Atsumu talked to Aiko on the phone every day via FaceTime, and when they talked, Atsumu saw Sakusa leave the room most of the time. Was he avoiding Atsumu? Did he regret the kiss? Everything looked like it, but what Atsumu didn't understand was, why? Why did Sakusa kiss him in the first place, if he was giving him the cold shoulder now? Had Atsumu done something wrong? It was weird. You've been quiet the last few days, is everything okay, Atsumu? Atsumu snapped his gaze to Komori, who was looking at him a little worried. Atsumu blinked a few times. Komori had totally pulled him out of his thoughts. Are you worried about Yachi? Atsumu sighed, reaching for the small headset button to secure it in his ear and packing a small knife under his hoodie. The last few days Atsumu had trained a lot with Komori. He was now much more experienced with weapons, but hoped he would never really have to use them. Let's just get this over with quickly. Atsumu gave Komori a weak smile and looked at him somewhat expectantly. Komori grinned broadly at him and nodded. Don't worry. In his hand he held a sniper, which he now presented to Atsumu by proudly clapping it twice. This baby and I have our eyes on you. I'm close to you, so nothing will happen to any of us. I really hope you don't have to use that thing. We will see. Ready to meet your ex-girlfriend? That sounds kind of worse when you say it, Komori. Well, there are nicer things in life. Komori shrugged his shoulders and gave Atsumu a mischievous smile. Atsumu blushed and now stared at the floor with wide eyes to avoid Komori's eye contact. He pulled the white mask he was wearing up to his face and made sure his black cap fit properly. Right now, he pulled it a little into his face, covering the redness on his cheeks. Nicer things in life. Even now, Atsumu couldn't manage not to think of Sakusa and the kiss. In fact, that was quite nice. The two set out to stop Yachi at a library. In the last few days they had found out that she went there regularly, so now was their chance to meet her there. Atsumu leaned against a wall in an alley around the corner and waited until he'll see Yachi pass by. Okay, alright, my sight is clear, I got you in focus. So far everything good with you? I'm fine. I feel a bit too inconspicuously dressed. Haha, you pass for a normal guy, it's fine. Maybe you should put away the sunglasses. Atsumu grinned and took off his sunglasses, tucking them into the front of his hoodie. Better. Whoa, look how those eyes sparkle. Atsumu, lend me your sunglasses, your face is shining. Atsumu laughed. You'll get what you deserve, Komori. Look at that stunning face. Komori giggled and tried to calm down a bit. Stunning face your ass. Yachi's coming, she sure has a pretty face. Stifle your smirk and shove it, Komori, I can feel it all the way over here. Blah blah, Yachi is almost with you, Atsumu. Atsumu shook his head with a smile and waited until Yachi walked past him. She's passing you in 3, 2, 1. Atsumu caught sight of Yachi and grabbed her wrist to pull her directly into his arms. Her whole body stiffened, she just inhaled hastily to say something, when Atsumu pressed her tighter and whispered in her ear. Yachi, don't scream. It's me. He pushed her a bit away from him and pulled down his mask, revealing the widest grin he had. Yachi looked at him a bit shocked, but as she realized who was standing in front of her, tears welled up in the corners of her eyes. Atsumu. She threw herself back into Atsumu arms, which made him take a few steps back. Yachi hugged Atsumu tightly, causing the blonde boy to smile. Are you alone? Are you being followed by someone? Yachi broke free of the hug again and gazed at Atsumu with a hint of panic in her eyes, her hands never letting go of his arms though. She then slowly shook her head. No, I am alone. What about you? You too. Ugh, these lies were killing Atsumu. He already hated having to lie to his brother, with Yachi it wasn't exactly easy for him either. Yeah. Yachi turned around a few times and then grabbed Atsumu's hand to pull him along. We'll go to my place where we can talk in private. Atsumu felt her whole body tense up again. He frowned. I heard it and am following you closely. If someone is there, I'll know. Don't worry, Atsumu, I'll watch your back. Yachi's apartment was about 10 minutes away. As the two arrived, Atsumu sat on her sofa while Yachi lowered the shutters everywhere, pretending that she wanted to avoid the sun shining into her apartment. It's getting pretty warm in here, isn't it? She smiled nervously while Atsumu frowned at her. He had no doubts now, the way she was acting something was wrong. He had been so overwhelmed at the art exhibition to see her there that he hadn't even noticed, but the longer he thought about it, the more he realized. She was so nervous even then, Atsumu just thought it was because they hadn't seen each other in so long. Surprised to see me? Atsumu squinted his eyes. Yachi flinched, but then settled down in the chair across from Atsumu. Yes, what are you doing here? Are you here for the athletics championship next week, too? Yachi played nervously with her fingers. Atsumu leaned forward and grabbed her hands. Her nervousness was driving him crazy. Yachi. She stiffened again as she heard Atsumu's deep and serious voice. Her gaze immediately jumped into Atsumu's eyes, blushing. Okay, Atsumu, whatever you are going to do now, please be careful. My view of you is blocked. I'll make sure no one comes into you, but that's all I can do for now. Be on the lookout. Atsumu sighed and gently squeezed Yachi's hands. He gave her a small smile, trying to calm her down a bit. I think we both know about something that we shouldn't talk about. But I need to know, Yachi. He locked his gaze with Yachi, having a somewhat pained look on his face. Yachi was totally perplexed. Did you knock me out at the art exhibition? Yachi's eyes widened, she inhaled sharply and looked at Atsumu in panic, her whole body stiffening again. She said nothing for a moment. Atsumu's expression changed, disappointment literally written all over his face. He let go of her hands and stood up. With one hand he took off his cap, with the other he ran his fingers through his hair, stopping halfway to grab a few strands. All this time he had the hope that she had nothing to do with it, but her silence and the panic on her face was confirmation enough. Confirmation that she had knocked out Atsumu. Confirmation that he had been wrong about her. Confirmation that he probably didn't know her as well as he thought he did. Yachi had a few tears running down her face, seeing Atsumu like this made her panic even more. Her eyes were wide open, she stuttered something that she hoped would ease the situation between them. I'll give you a name, and if we really know about the same thing, I can explain everything to you, Atsumu. Atsumu turned to Yachi to look into her pitying eyes. He drew his eyebrows together. But first, I have to be sure you're really alone. Atsumu raised his eyebrows and looked at Yachi with some indignation. Of course she had figured it out. Say that you are alone, Atsumu. Madness spread through Atsumu's body. He reached to his ear, pressed the button to disconnect from Komori, took off his headset and put it on the table in front of Yachi. No. Atsumu. Komori pressed on his headset to connect to Atsumu, but he failed. This idiot. Shit. Atsumu crossed his arms and looked at his ex-girlfriend. His expression was more serious than it had been for a long time. Go ahead. Yachi frowned as she saw the headset on the table and gulped. She looked at Atsumu in hurt, but he didn't make a face. Seiki. Atsumu's face went blank, his eyes opened wide, and he propped his arms against the sofa now. He looked at Yachi, who looked back frightened. Atsumu gulped and whispered. So it's really true. He sat back down on the sofa, leaned forward and grabbed Yachi's hands again. She stroked Atsumu's palms and discovered a scar on his left hand. The place where Atsumu had a knife blade pierced into his hand. Yachi's eyes had filled with even more tears by now. She stuttered out an apology. I didn't mean it, Atsumu. I'm sorry. Oh gosh, this is all my fault. Yachi. Hey. Atsumu pulled her into a hug to calm her down. He frowned, knowing that Yachi really was sorry and not yet understanding why she acted the way she did and what her connection to Seiki was. Please, just explain it to me. Atsumu, I'm so sorry, please forgive me. Yachi sobbed. Atsumu cupped her face and fixed her gaze on his own by now. He gave her a warm and sincere smile. Hey. Don't worry, okay. I just need to understand, and I know you can explain it to me. Yachi gripped Atsumu's hands and took a deep breath to reassure herself. I am in love with Kuro. Yes. I know Suna told me, and I'm glad, but what does that have to do with? Yachi pressed her finger to Atsumu's lips to shut him up. Atsumu looked at her in even more confusion. Seiki threatened to harm Kuro if I didn't do it. He would make sure he couldn't participate in the championship or could dump his career at all. Atsumu, I was afraid that he would become violent towards Kuro. I don't even know what he's capable of. Atsumu frowned and looked into Yachi's teary eyes. He still didn't understand at all. Yachi cleared her throat. Seiki is my uncle. Atsumu's eyes widened, his mouth gaping open a little in shock. What? Atsumu tried to make any connection between the two but couldn't put it together. Yachi had never mentioned him before. You know, my mother raised me on her own. Atsumu nodded, still confused. Seiki is the brother of my deceased father. When Dad died of cancer, he had hardly shown his face. To be honest, I was fine with that. He had always scared me a little. Yachi withdrew a bit and clutched herself. I knew something was wrong with him, but luckily my mother and I were never involved. In the last few months, however, he showed up more and more often, which must have been because you started working for Eiko Suzuki. Atsumu nodded, his eyes still wide open. So he knows that I work for Eiko and was able to connect with you right away. Exactly. I should lure you all out one by one. First, he wanted to take care of this Komori, so my uncle demanded that I should talk about him as conspicuously as possible. It hit Atsumu like a slap in the face. Of course, the day Komori returned to Eiko with stab wounds in his back. Seiki must have planned it that way. Then I should go to this art exhibition and take care of Sakusa. Actually, he was the one who was supposed to be knocked out, but when we were talking, he suddenly left. So Seiki told me through a headset that you should be the one to take the knockout drops by then. Atsumu abruptly stood up and tore his gaze to Yachi in panic. He was actually there. Yachi winced and slid back, seeing Atsumu like that scared her a lot. Why yet? Atsumu ran his hands through his head, sat back down again and leaned back to bring his palms to his face. He exhaled deeply and muttered a few curses under his breath. Tsumu, I'm so sorry. I didn't know what to do. I had to choose, it was either you or Kuro. I'll be honest, I didn't think about anything, I just had the hope that the Sakusa would somehow get you out of there in one piece. Yachi was shaking. She probably just realized how bad and messed up the whole situation was. Oh God Tsumu, please forgive me. Yachi sobbed again. Atsumu sighed, then took her in his arms and ran his hands over her back to calm her down a bit. He couldn't be mad at her, he shouldn't. Seiki is the one to blame and not Yachi. Hey, it's okay. Please don't go crazy, everything turned out fine didn't it? I'm here and Kuro is okay too. Yachi squeezed out of Atsumu's embrace and looked at him in tears. Atsumu gave her a gentle smile while she was still frowning, but in the end he made her smile a little as well. He wiped away her tears and patted her head. We're going to fix all of this, okay? Yachi just nodded. He cut off the connection again, so I don't know where he is right now, but he will be down at your place in 2 weeks. His company is celebrating, an anniversary party I guess? And he will be there. So far I have been able to eavesdrop. Wait, I'll write down the address. Yachi got up frantically and looked for something to write. She then wrote down the address and shakily handed the piece of paper to Atsumu. She was a mess. Here. I hope this will help you. Atsumu took the note and looked at Yachi with concern. He stowed the note in his pocket and hugged Yachi one more time, not letting her go until she finally calmed herself down. Atsumu took a deep breath and rested his head on her shoulder. Thank you Yachi. Yachi's expression softened again and she stroked Atsumu's back. I'm sorry, that's all I can do. This is more than enough. They let go of one another again and both smiled at each other with tears in their eyes. Yachi calmed down again, she knew she could trust Atsumu. I'm glad Sakusa saved you back then Tsumu. I don't want to imagine what would have happened otherwise. Atsumu smiled and his face blushed. Once again his heart beat strongly as he thought of Sakusa. You know, at the art exhibition, you could see it clearly. Atsumu looked at Yachi in confusion. What? She smiled. What you feel for him? Atsumu's eyes widened. He was a blushing mess. Was he that predictable? Yachi giggled, she placed a finger on his chest and grinned mischievously at him. Her tears already stopped running by now. Don't even try to deny it. Atsumu chuckled at Yachi's behaving. I guess I like him a lot. And he likes you at least as much, otherwise he wouldn't have given me those killing looks back then. Atsumu couldn't quite follow Yachi. She clicked her tongue and looked at Atsumu accusingly. When we were talking Tsumu, he was jealous as hell. Atsumu's eyes widened. Sakusa. Jealous. Did he have stronger feelings for him than Atsumu thought after all? Atsumu chuckled nervously. No way. Have you ever told him how you feel? Atsumu winced. They had never actually talked about their feelings for each other. Well, except for the day Sakusa kissed him. Whereas Sakusa didn't really reveal his feelings there either. He called Atsumu special, but that doesn't say how he feels about him and what he thinks about him. Atsumu wasn't sure about anything with Sakusa. Sure, the kiss itself meant a lot. As much passion as was in it, it had to mean a lot. But what if Sakusa realized it was a mistake? It was strange that they hadn't spoken since then. Like, at all. Atsumu gulped and was about to say something when a muffled noise was heard from outside. 2 times in a row. The two of them snapped their gazes in the direction of the door. Atsumu frowned while panic was literally written across Yachi's face. Something was going on in this place. Atsumu grabbed Yachi's wrist and hid with her behind a sideboard near the door. She was shaking all over, Atsumu's extremely worried look not making her feel any more at ease. Atsumu. Atsumu slowly and carefully pressed his hand on Yachi's mouth to shush her. He lifted his hoodie to bring out the knife he had hidden and got into position in case someone came through the door. Unfortunately for Atsumu, he grabbed the knife with his still slightly injured hand. Suddenly the door slammed open. Atsumu's eyes snapped and Yachi started screaming in panic, but immediately brought her hands to her mouth to shut herself up. The man who kicked in the door and stood in Yachi's apartment immediately turned to face Atsumu and Yachi, deflecting Atsumu's knife attack at the last second. Atsumu gritted his teeth and the man kicked Atsumu in the stomach, striking the knife from his hand with an ease. Atsumu wrapped his arms around his stomach in pain and looked up to face the man, only to be met by a completely perplexed and horrified expression. "Whoa, Atsumu, chill. It's me."